Heyo, it's Freeloader from Team AQZ. I'm making a bit of a tournament report style video where we'll go over my deck building process as well as the tournament I played said deck in, along with my thoughts on the hero and the deck, etc. I'll start off by saying, if you are interested in participating in the online events yourself, I will leave some links to the two biggest online tournament discords in the description. There are lots of events, some with slightly different rule sets, so make sure to pay attention to those as well before signing up for a tournament. Now, let's get into how I build a deck. I wanted to build a Subhash deck to give the hero a proper try with some of the new cards from Whispers of the Maze, and more importantly, because I don't have a tournament result on this hero yet, and I am gunning along with some others to be the first person to have a result on 39 cards on every hero. I only have a couple left to go, and I think Subhash is the most challenging one among them. Okay, I'll start by just throwing some of my thoughts and numbers at you, just to kind of set the stage, and then we'll get into the actual deck itself. There are tons of different ways to approach deck building. For myself, I have a core approach that applies to all the decks I build. The core of every deck, in my opinion, is its rare package. This is because there are not enough uniques in a deck for them to be your core strategy in every game, and commons are the cards that in the ideal world end up as your mana orbs, because they have the weaker effect obviously. So because of that, you're not really looking to play them as much as you might think. Although the common to rare to unique ratio in deck building is a distribution of 54% commons, 38% rares, and 7% uniques, roughly, I don't think the aim in the game is to play on those ratios. Assuming your average game gets to around 9 mana, for example, just for the sake of argumentation, in a perfect game where your mana cards are all commons with the weakest effect, the ideal common to rare to unique ratio in when you play the game would actually be 40% commons, 50% rares, and 10% uniques. Obviously, this is rarely going to actually play out this way, and there are numerous factors that make this even more complicated. For example, picking up magical trainings when you're playing Fen. So don't fixate on these numbers too much. They are just there to demonstrate the point I'm trying to make, that the rares are actually the core of your deck and game plan strategy, and there are absolutely exceptions to this rule, but, you know, take it how it is. Because of how small deck sizes are in this game, relative to number of copies of a card you get to play, I think having a core gameplay loop you are going for is very worthwhile since you just so consistently hit it. So when I first start building a deck, I really like to start with a certain number of effects, usually at rare, that I can build around. For this deck, I knew quite far ahead of time that I wanted to play around Bravos Vanguard and Ouroboros Incaster as my main gameplay loop, as these particular rares can combine to combat Subhash's resource issue quite effectively by always picking each other up and removing fleeting from one another. The main issue with this core strategy that I immediately see is that it has neither great stat outputs, after you efficiency, or removal integrated into it. So there are quite a number of weaknesses that I will need to shore up somehow. How I do this is very important, and for that I really need to find the strengths of this core as well as the weaknesses. I see this mini combo as being very strong in low resource situations, as it just keeps feeding into itself. The way I choose to approach this is for a very unique dynamic in Altered, which most decks adhere to some degree, which is that the pressure a player applies must for the most part be matched by the other player. In other words, if I play very aggressively for potential double advances from turn 1 already, then my opponent won't be as free to play for their own resources and card advantage as they would otherwise be, and they're instead forced to match me as to not fall behind in expeditions. This isn't a flawless plan, but on a hero I consider quite weak, I'm fairly happy with it. My aim is hence to get myself into a position where I am using my resources very aggressively to get my opponent on low resources as well. After I establish my core strategy, I start throwing in cards that I expect will be pretty much auto-includes in the strategy. In this case, and quite often this means putting in some commons, as rare slots are so contested in this game, it's often hard to find auto-includes among them. So here are where the Grems are added, as they're a great flex option to put lots of stats into play or mess with my opponent's landmarks. a 1 of Keylon Burst and Avalanche for removal. Notably, I run these as I think it is important to run some removal, but I don't run more because frankly these are pretty bad cards, and you only want them if you really need them. Otherwise, you would prefer not to see them ever, which means I don't think I can run more than 3 removal cards because of how weak they are, but I can't run less than 1 because of how important these effects are. This is also, in my opinion, the big reason as to why Axiom is struggling at the moment. The Bug Out Bag is also an auto-include, as far as I'm concerned, and because I'm running Grems and Bug Out Bag, and I'm looking for 2 costs to go alongside my hero ability anyway, I decided to include the Ada Lovelace common and Armored Jammer package as well, since they align so well with my game plan. I've thrown some Lord Kelvins at this point since I've heard and seen in various tournaments that it plays quite well in Subhash, and also thrown some rare hooks as it is just the best card in the Axiom faction, and help shore up my weaknesses that I'm already spotting to some degree. At this point, I already have all but 3 of my rares chosen, as well as 14 commons. Looking at my list, I knew I needed a couple more landmarks, and being a huge Keylon Cylinder rare fanboy, I immediately added those to the list, locking up my rare slots. Then I saw I was quite short on characters with all the landmarks I was playing, so I added a variety of common characters to my list. I don't remember exactly what I added initially. I believe I was running Sap Sniffer among some other things. At this point, I started testing the list on an alt account on Arena to see how it felt in a relatively competitive setting, and quickly made some changes after testing. First off, I reshuffled my common character base to include Amelia as a 1 cost from reserve option for turns where I have even mana and want to use my hero ability, since I'm running so many 2 cost characters, as well as Dr. Frankenstein for being a high utility option that plays very well and flexibly with all the permanents I have access to. I also shifted 1 Lord Kelvin into a Tinkerbell, as I was seeing the clunky 4-cost card just slightly too often. I then commonified an Armor Jammer and cut a Bravos Vanguard to make room for Icebound Peaks, as I felt like it was a great way to apply pressure, and Vanguard often was not needed until later in the game, which resulted in me putting it into my mana orbs pretty early, which is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to tell if a rare slot is not worthwhile. On initial testing, I used my own uniques, but at this point, I lent 2 uniques from Runefolk to strengthen my core strategy, and I was happy with the list. And to go over the uniques I'm running, there is a Copelia of my own that I used in my Trace Resupply strats, but works fine here due to my high landmark count. Then another unique Copelia that has the same Copelia condition, but has an At Dusk remove fleeting clause, which plays very well with the Incaster and Bravos Vanguards, as well as other cards in this deck. Finally, a Baku with a very specific condition that when it goes to reserve from the Expedition Zone, an opponent discards a card from their hand. This one is a bit more advanced and requires understanding of how uniques are generated in this game to find. As far as I know, a Baku unique in Axiom, I'm not 100% sure if this applies to Ysmir, can only have the discard effect if played for 4 cost. This goes to the reserve ability is one of the only ways to get around this expensive effect, and a way to play it for cheaper. For this you need to play it alongside a card like Bravos Vanguard or my Copelia unique, but when it goes off really, really well. So, this is how I got my list together, and now for the actual tournament itself. Alright, so I'm going to go over a couple of the games I had, 3 specifically, and then we'll see about the rest. So in this first game I played, it was the first game of the tournament. I was up against a Sigismar, and this was my opening hand. Seeing that Copelia, obviously quite happy about it. I decided to put into mana pretty much the entire right side, the 2 Emilias and a Frankenstein, as it's, they're okay cards, but they're not exactly what I'm looking for here in the early game. Bug Out Bag is quite good. I actually have a bit of an interesting decision off rip. I decided to use my hero ability to put the Bug Out Bag into the mana zone, and then play it immediately, rather than putting Frankenstein into the mana zone and playing the Bug Out Bag. This choice I don't think it's like per se 100% correct, but I also like the option of keeping Dr. Frankenstein in hand to mean that I can't get sabotaged, and also so that I can mana next turn potentially, as it isn't the greatest card typically that I'm looking for here. So I go with that. I don't get punished. My opponent plays the Ordis Carrier landmark, and I get a double advance on turn 1, which you love to see into a Sigismar. On day 2, I draw my Baku unique and an Armor Jammer. And at this point, I already know I can forsake the Subhash ability entirely and just play off of my uniques. And that is going to be the plan this game. So yeah, I don't use my hero ability, and I just play out my Baku opposite side of where my opponent plays. This puts my opponent into a pickle because they could surely double advance on me here, maybe even block me as well, but then they would have almost no cards left immediately, so they decide to just trade 1 for 1 here to not lose out too much on resources. Unfortunately for them, we already know what's happening. I draw a double bug out bag, but it doesn't matter too much. One of them goes into mana, and I play my 2 uniques, which my Copelia here does end up removing fleeting from the Baku. I get to trade 1 for 1 again, and get to keep burning cards from my opponent's hand. After dusk, I do replay this Copelia on the companion side. This was a mistake, but not too big of a deal since I am playing more for resources anyway. I draw a couple cards, Grem's Ouroboros Incaster. I put the second bug out bag into mana as well, actually, and keep this utility. Grem's obviously nice into the Ordis Carrier, but might also use it to create stats instead, we'll see. Go with another Baku. My opponent played a Open the Gates, so that allowed me to sabotage as well using the Armor Jammer, and this game is pretty much just over here. And yeah, my opponent has a bad draw, so that is the end of game 1. And we really saw here that this was just a showcase of how strong these uniques are when you get them in combination. This had very little to do with the rest of the game plan, barely anything else even mattered that me or Sigismar were doing, just yeah, uniques doing unique things. After losing round 2 against Golrang, I was in my 3rd game against a Kojo, and here is the opening hand. Bit of an interesting choice here. I decide to keep just a good overall opener, but I'm very open with where I'm going with my game plan still. I end up playing my turn 1 by revealing my Tinkerbell, but returning her turn with the Ouroboros Incaster. It telegraphs my turn 2 a lot, so I feel like retrospectively I should have showed them my Grems and then taken that back so they don't play around to sabotage as much. But this works out either way, so hey ho, so it goes. And turn 2, I do draw another Grems and a Hooked. Hooked could be critical in this game for my own resource manipulation. I go along with this plan of making a Brass Bug, playing out the Tinkerbell, but I do get punished by a Haven Serengar. It's a very card-efficient way for Kojo to block me and advance on the hero side, while also putting a card into reserve that plays really well into what I'm trying to do with my deck, as I'm trying to get him out of resources. Next turn, I do draw an Armor Jammer, but I'm not the first player to act. Still, I keep the Armor Jammer, and actually, what do I bin? I bin the Grems, as I just don't think I'll have the time to play it as things are standing at the moment, and I need Amelia Earhart for this turn potentially. My opponent actually decides to start their turn with a Tinkerbell, so to sabotage my Amelia Earhart. This is really good for me and allows me the opportunity to play my Armor Jammer to actually refocus my game plan. All of a sudden, my Kojo opponent is really short on cards. We both pass here in order to maintain our own resources, and we go into the next turn. I draw Keylon Burst and Keylon Cylinder, and this is a classic situation why removal is pretty bad here. I just don't have enough cards to be able to afford draws like this. The Keylon Burst will end up going to mana. Before my opponent even has a single play, I put my Keylon Cylinder into my reserve to make the Brass Bug and boost it up immediately with a cheap After You effect. But my opponent can just overload the companion side as a result. I'm at a tough position here. I have to decide if I want to hook something, but I think with what my game plan is, my hooked is going to draw me 2 cards. I want to force them to play cards, so even if I end up losing an expedition because of this, I end up using hooked on one of their characters, and they decide they cannot contest here, and I get an expedition lead via this play actually. Now I am up on cards, I have my landmarks out, I have a hooked in reserve. This should be cruising from here, and we, make our bugs, we get our after effects. This turn was just me creating a bug, and then whatever my opponent played, I hooked it over and drew some cards. So really efficient for me. I get to just keep my lead. It really showcased that turn how strong hooked was. Following turn, I'm just way up in resources. I get to play the game I want to play. This is up until my opponent plays this unique Atlas that is just huge, and I didn't play around very well. Maybe I could have done this better. Either way, I get to use hooked and a Keylon cylinder so that I at least only let them advance on one side, but we are back to equity now, so a little bit scary. I show them a sabotage effect, so they play out their unique from reserve first, but even with a second unique of theirs in this armored foundry armor, I am still able to trade expeditions 1 for 1 and set up my Copelia for next turn with a boost from my Keylon cylinder. And that is all she wrote with this sabotage setup I have as well. They just have 0 cards going into next turn, and that is the end of that one. The final game I wanted to showcase here was actually my last game I played in the tournament against Erlea, and also my favorite game in this tournament that I played. We are into Nevenka. Nevenka, very flexible hero, very scary to go into, can play very aggressive, can play for later game setups as well. Our opening hand is a bit dubious, a lot of options again. I think these turn 1s are just often so awkward on Subhash. I decided to keep the Icebound Peak to play for a kind of guaranteed double advance later in the game in this matchup, and keep alongside it some expedition permanents, or some permanents in general, to set up my later stages of the game. My turn 1, I decided to just deploy Icebound Peak, and if Erlea wants to take the lead, they can. Indeed they do here with this Ouroboros Inkcaster. I'm not too worried. Getting out an Icebound Peak does mean at some point in the game I should be able to get back expedition advancements. Turn 2, I draw the Ada Lovelace and hooked. A bit awkward that I need to mana something here. I decide to get rid of the bug out bag and put the Ada Lovelace in reserve. However, I do get exhausted immediately, and as a result of that, I actually hooked their Snowball Commando into my expedition with the Brass Bug in order to just force them to commit more cards. I do still have this Keylon cylinder as well to contest if they do not and block them out. They do end up playing another card, and it's a really good one. Ouroboros Inkcaster will allow them to maintain their resources, so I still need to commit my cylinder in order just to not fall too far behind on expeditions. This is still fine though. Next turn, we see another Icebound Peak and Ouroboros Inkcaster. Still a little bit awkward, just in general what my plays are. Here I decide to put a card into mana, but then not use my Subhash ability, as I'm looking to use Ada to get this Icebound Peak into reserve and draw a card. I do so, and we get another loss in terms of expedition advancements where I lose on the hero side, but again, at least we are staying in this game. We're giving ourselves a bit of a setup, and even being 2 expeditions behind it with this Icebound Peak, not an issue. Finally, we draw a lot of hooked effects here. We have a bit of a character crisis, as we cannot actually proc our Icebound Peak that is currently in play, which we really would have loved to do this turn. So I need to pivot a bit. I again do not use the Subhash hero ability, and just play out 2 dudes, again going down another advancement, but at least we're not stalling out too far. Here I actually made a misplay in where I put my Keylon cylinder boost. I should have really put on Lord Kelvin, but I won a 50-50, so I didn't get punished, but I also don't advance here. I don't know, there was an upside where if I didn't place the boost that way, Nevenka could have played in a different way and not committed as many resources. So yeah, it's a bit iffy, but I think I definitely made a mistake here and got lucky. I draw 2 Keylon cylinders, and there are so few characters that I have access to, it is a bit painful. I put one of them into mana, keep this avalanche around if I ever need it. But yeah, this is a great opener to a turn. I finally get to proc my Icebound Peak, make a ton of stats, exhaust this magical training as well, in case they do just want to give up on this turn entirely. And they kind of are by playing this Nyala, and I don't even need to hook this or anything. So I decided to just set up my next Icebound Peak, call it a day. Now we are already a lot closer. We're drawing more cards, finally some new characters to play, which is a huge help. And we have a decent setup here. We're only 1 expedition behind all of a sudden, and we have a way back into this game. Hooked is also going to be big here into this Nyala. As things play out, there is a decent trade of resources. They have a unique here that does give fleeting to all of my characters. This isn't as bad as it seems, since I was overflowing my reserve anyway a little bit, and at least I get my Icebound Peak counters this way. And, you know, it's still a 1-for-1, so not the end of the world. I should have a chance to leverage this Icebound Peak next turn with my hero ability. This does end up happening. I actually draw double unique, but the quote-unquote wrong Copelia for the Baku combo. That being said, it is probably the right Copelia for this situation, as it's getting close to the end of the game. I'm not going to be meaningfully impacting Nevenka's resources here, so just having stats is better. And the way this turn plays out, I mean, this is again just a great setup to have as the first action of your turn. 999 in stats on one side, 4/4 blocking on the other. I have the hooked as well, so if they do play anything into this hero side, I can just swing it over to my 999 block. And yeah, this is kind of what ends up happening. I swing over a unique. My opponent had a tough choice with Cloth Cocoon, where they were barely unable to meaningfully impact any side with it, so they go after a Keylon cylinder instead. They have a double unique setup here, so I'm really low on resources, but I do get an expedition lead finally in this game. Then here I do decide to put a, nothing into mana, instead just sending my Frankenstein to reserve. This is really good stats from reserve, so quite a nice play. I decided to just commit everything to my hero side, companion side I mean, and that does just end up being enough against these mismatched statistics from the Lyra faction, and we take this win by the skin of our teeth. I did get lucky off of my misplay. If I had gotten unlucky there, then we would have gone to arena and I would have likely lost. I'm not 100% sure actually, but better this way. GG's to Erlia for sure on this game. And yeah, that was it. Just to quickly summarize the other games I had. Game 2 I lost on time against the Golrang. It was surprisingly competitive, but I think there was a very good chance I was going to lose that game anyway after I did 1 or 2 misplays in the game. Could have played better and maybe gotten the win, but didn't quite end up happening. Game 4 I was into a Thanos actually, and we had a very interactive matchup, but I was able to grind them out with the power of my uniques and sabotage effects. Very strong combination. Game 5 was another game against Kojo that also went quite similar to my other game against Kojo, where I also just managed to, through key sabotage effects, grind them out of the game and eventually take a win. So pretty good performance overall with a 5-1 record. And actually here with the stats I have going on in the background, you can see kind of the overall tournament. Wasn't the biggest, it was the classic NA Wednesday AWOL, and I managed to get third overall, so I'm very happy with it, especially on Subhash. Okay, after taking a look at the tournament overall, I wanted to talk a bit about the list, maybe some things I would change around now in retrospect, as well as where I see Subhash in the competitive metagame and kind of what they need maybe to work out. Starting with this deck in particular, the unique synergies felt very strong and workable. The deck made good use of manipulating where cards were at what time to always get the right timing on the right effects. The low character count definitely hurt in quite a lot of situations, but with a bit more discard removal there would definitely have been some turns because of that this deck just would not have functioned properly. I would have had 0 characters in play. Hooked was amazing as always, really saved me in a number of games. I think the deck did a very good job at being a very grindy deck in a super bizarre way, but was really fun to play. In an ideal world, I think Subhash would be good at taking double advances early in the game, as it allows you to play so well for your own strategy. And you could see it in that first game. Yes, it was just a bunch of uniques being really strong, but it's so much easier for this hero to do what they want to do if they have an early expedition lead. In terms of particular cards, I think I could have had another Bravos Vanguard in this list, specifically because of my unique setup. Without these Copeles and Baku, I think 2 is the correct number, but with them, 3 seems a lot better. I was very impressed with Icebound Peak as well, as it allowed me to play from behind very comfortably. Yet still, I wonder if maybe 2 is too many and it should maybe be a 1 of? I'm not sure. Ouroboros Incaster is odd. It feels mandatory to not run out of resources while also providing a solid body, and yet it also feels kind of underwhelming in a good number of situations, where it's just too awkward to get the proper setup for it. Grimes was good, but also seemed mostly like a utility card and less powerful than I initially expected and was hoping the card would be. Still, with it and Bug Out Bag, this hero got some much needed glue for the deck to function. I liked Ada a ton as well, but it does require the right number of landmarks. I think to me, the biggest standout card was Armored Jammer. It felt like that was what really made this deck do what it was supposed to do, and enabled a lot of the cards within it. On a note of things I would change, there's fairly little, as I'm very happy with the list, but I may tinker around with Lord Kelvin and Tinkerbell numbers some more, as I think that felt a little odd still. On the topic of power level, I don't think, even with the optimal uniques, this deck is reliable enough for the top level of altered competition. Clearly it's strong enough to be able to do well and be a force to be reckoned with, but I don't see it becoming a top 5 deck within the current setup. The hero ability is abysmally weak when compared to Sigismar or Kojo, and the card pool in general is worse as well. The lack of a single good removal option really hurts. It means that while this deck feels good when running into standard strategies, I'm pretty sure this has a 100% loss rate into Hostage, into S+ tier uniques, into Tsadi Sakurabu combos, etc. Finally, mostly for fun, I would like to think about what Subhash would need to become a meta force. I think the most obvious boost Subhash could use would be a stronger hero ability. For example, if they didn't have to pay 1 to spawn their Brass Bug. I could see this being way too strong, especially as the card pool grows, so I'm not sure that is a good idea, but as things are, a 1-cost 2/2/2 with no After You ability is very dubious. If the ability somehow had an After You effect attached to it, I'm sure that would make it feel quite strong as well, so if the ability triggered as an optional first turn in the afternoon instead of at noon, might be a better way to approach it. I doubt anything like this is going to happen, so instead, what would the deck need in terms of cards to function? At the top of the list here would be some solid removal options, especially for Subhash, who is always down on mana. A 1 or 2 cost removal option to be able to make an aggressive push for expeditions, or actually punish a landmark play meaningfully, seems very important and is on top of the things Subhash desperately needs in order to succeed. Something like a 2/2 cost 2/2/2 that has a From Reserve ability that each player sacrifices a landmark or character. Or something like a Brass Bug conditional 2 cost removal option would really boost this playstyle. More cards like Bug Out Bag would also feel great, especially if they were landmarks, as Subhash plays really well with 2 cost landmarks. And with that, you've made it to the end of my Subhash tourney report. Let me know if you enjoyed this format, and if I should do more of it in the future if I do reasonably well in the tournament with a bit of a wacky list. Otherwise, I think I already know what I want to do for my next video, as it's going to be a little bit of a doozy, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, see you all then.